Hi, so the aim of this workshop is to create a simple menu in Photoshop and Encore that goes from one menu to the other. We're only going to link a couple buttons. So this is the initial menu. When I click on extras, it will go to an extras, and these are sort of other buttons that could exist but don't at the moment, and go back to main menu, and when I click play it links to a video that eventually, when it will end, will come back to the main menu again. So what we're going to do is we're going to get on with this now, and I want you to download the assets pack that's underneath this video. Once you unzip the assets pack, and you do that by right clicking on the zip file and extracting it, you should have these 4 files in a folder, and they are, you've got a picture from Alien here, you've got a small video clip from Alien here, some theme music, and inside here you've got some fonts as well, and you'll want to install those fonts before we continue. And these fonts are basically Alien style fonts from the film, and you can go in there and there's a load of them. You can install 1 or 2 of these. It's not important that we get it accurate, it's just important that we learn the techniques. So if you double click on any of these, it should install directly to your PC. So once you've done that, we're going to need to start up Photoshop, because Encore menus start in Photoshop if you're making your own custom ones. So I'm using Photoshop CC. It doesn't really matter what version of Photoshop you use. In fact, we're going to be using a range of different ones. We're going to be using Encore CS5 as well. There was never a CC version released, only CS6 was the maximum they went to with it. But it doesn't matter, all the techniques we're using are very basic. There might be some layout differences, but overall it will be the same sort of functionality. And once that's done, what we're going to do is you can either go to File, Open, and you can open the image, or you can, if you've got your folder open, we can just drag it straight into Photoshop and up it will load. Now the next thing we're going to need to do is create a DVD sized composition. Now it would be different if you were doing it for Blu-ray, and you can do Blu-ray as well on Encore, but we're going to create one for the PAL region. If you're in any of the countries like Canada, USA, South Korea, you'll be using NTSC if you wanted to do a DVD menu. I'll show you the options first, and then we'll discuss what PAL and NTSC are. So if I go up to File, New, and from here I can select Video and Film, or Film and Video, that way round. And you'll see here I've got NTSC DV, NTSC widescreen, and the other good ones down here are PAL D1 DV widescreen and PAL D1 DV. Now selecting these does change the aspect ratio somewhat, or rather the pixels somewhat, because you'll notice here on NTSC DV it's 720 by 480 at a resolution of 72, and if I go to D1 or a PAL version, doesn't matter which PAL version, I've got 720 by 576 at 72. So PAL has a greater, larger screen. It's slightly got more pixels in its height. However, PAL only worked at 25 frames per second, whereas NTSC had 30 frames per second. They're basically the 2 most common video standards. NTSC is basically the standard that was used by North America and most of South America, and each frame is made up of 525 individual scan lines. It creates a composition that's the right shape, and what I mean by that is PC screens have different shaped pixels compared to old TV screens. So what Photoshop attempts to do is to correct the way we view it, so it looks like the pixels are the same shape as what we're going to be using. So the screen is basically the same shape. If I go to View and turn Pixel Aspect Ratio Correction off, you'll see it actually looks far more square, far more like a 5:4 aspect ratio. And if I go back to Pixel Aspect Ratio Correction, you'll see it slightly stretches the image, and you can see the guidelines get stretched around here as well. And it's important to note that these guidelines actually mean something as well. The outer guideline is called the action safe zone. So any action which happens on your screen must happen inside this outer line going around here, and the inside is called the title safe zone, and any titles should be within inside this area as well. And that's because different TVs had sometimes would crop off certain amounts of what you could see, so it was safe to be within inside these guidelines. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click onto my move item here, onto my move mouse, move arrow, and drag this picture from here up into the untitled document and let go. And here is our picture in here. And what I'm going to do is just scale this now by pressing Ctrl and T. I'm going to grab the corner and hold down Shift to drag but maintain the aspect ratio of the piece. And I'm just going to drag it into position. I could have also placed this document instead of opening it in another document, but there we go. And now by double clicking to apply it, it is now within inside our image Photoshop document. So from here I'm going to just make it look a little bit nicer. Someone, whoever did this before, had made quite a hard line up the middle here, and I just want to feather that a bit because it looks a little bit hard. So I'm just going to go get a brush by left clicking on the brush icon here and drop down menu here, and I'm going to choose a feather brush, doesn't matter which one, it's basically any of the blurred brushes. Click on that, go to size, make sure that my colour is on black here. So I've got quite a large brush, and all I'm going to do is left click and gently feather in around here just to try and improve it somewhat so it doesn't seem quite so forced, that cut between the black and the alien. Right, now you've got the basic background, we're going to delete the existing background that you've got, so you should have a white background here, and to do that we need to unlock it first of all. So I'm just going to click on the unlock padlock, CC actually, just you click on it and it deletes. If you're on one of the earlier versions you have to double click it and press OK, and that will delete it as well, or unlock it rather. And then I press the delete layer, and there you go. So I've just got the one layer left now. Okay, now we're going to add a title to this. So I'm going to go to my text, and I'm just going to click anywhere. I don't click and drag because I don't want to limit the size of my text. And I'm going to type the word alien. We can't see it because it's black at the moment. I'm just going to highlight across it, click and turn white. You could have done that beforehand. And I'm maybe going to make this about 100. And then I'm just going to put it up into this title safe zone here. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to double click on the T over in my layers panel. I'm going to choose my alien font. I'm going to go for, let's see what Alien League bold's like. Okay, I'm going to go with that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust the kerning between the letters. I want it to be further apart. If I have a look at one of the Alien posters, you'll see that this font is actually further apart, as is the one which this is actually taken from. This font's more of an Aliens font, so for all of you fans watching who love Aliens, basically you can see there's a bit of a gap between them, so it's more from Aliens, but we're going to do the first Alien here. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to adjust the kerning somewhat, and to do that what I'm going to do is select the type tool, just click in between, and if you hold down Alt and use one of the arrow keys, left and right, while you hold down Alt, you can spread out the text. So that looks somewhat better. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a green gradient, kind of like the later posters where I kind of prefer it. It might make it feel a bit more alien-esque. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rasterize this type, and by rasterizing it I can add a lot more effects to it. First of all, I can lock the transparency around this font now, but beware, when you rasterize the font you cannot alter it again, so you may want to make a copy before you do that. I'm going to select my foreground color as, let's just see, sort of kind of dark green, and my background color as quite a light green. I'm going to choose my gradient tool from down the side, and now because the transparency is locked, if I just click and drag down, I kind of get this now dark green to light green gradient happening. Let's do it a little bit less. There we go, so you can see it a bit better. So the longer I drag it, the less the wider the gradient. If I do a short drag, it happens as a short quick gradient. So there we go. And finally what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add, by double clicking, actually let me unlock the transparency first. If I double click on this layer next to the word alien, just in the blank area here, I bring up the layer styles, and if I go to let's go to outer glow down here. If I click the tick box, you can see it's added an outer glow. Now when you're using the layer styles, you'll notice here that the properties here are actually for the blending options. If I just click where it says outer glow, I get the options here now for the glow. I'm going to change the color to a green. Oh, there we go. Okay, bring up the opacity somewhat and slightly change the size. Okay, so now we have our word alien, and now what we're going to do is we're going to add some buttons. Now when working between Photoshop and Encore, there are some special characters that you can use that Encore recognize as buttons when you bring them into Encore. And to do that, the first thing we're going to do is create a folder. If I create a folder, so it's called Group 1, I'm going to double click where it says Group 1, and I use open bracket plus close bracket or parentheses, depending on how you prefer to say it, and I'm going to call this button play. Now anything I put inside of this folder will be a button, so it's very careful, you have to be very careful that you do not include anything like the background image in it, or other buttons get mixed up with inside this button, or else the DVD menu can become quite confused and it won't actually function properly. So I've got this folder selected. I'm going to get my type tool and I'm going to type the word play. I'm going to bring down my size of my font now. It's important you should be working round about a 24 point, but obviously it depends. If you're working with a custom font, you don't know exactly the size that it's going to be, so you have to play it by eye a bit. But if it's too small on a low resolution screen, it'll pixelate. So I would say that is quite small actually. I'm going to bring that up to 36, maybe even 48, and I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to make it a slightly lighter green. In fact, I'm going to pick that background color green. Okay. Now we're going to make a simple highlight in this. Now there are some rules to highlight which I'll go through in another tutorial, but basically you can only use 3 colors, and when making a highlight you have to use the following special characters. So I'm going to create a new layer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a rectangular marquee around the play button, and I'm going to select the paint bucket tool, and I'm just going to go for a plain white highlight. So this is for when someone goes over the button, this will happen. And I'm going to call it open bracket equals 1, close bracket. Now that now becomes a highlight. So when I take it into Encore, Encore recognises that's a highlight and hide it. It'll only hide it if there's more than one button as well. If there's only one button there, it'll always be active. It'll be highlighted already. But it'll recognise that it's a button. And it's called equals 1 because it's the first of my colours. I can use up to 3 colours, so if I wanted to change a colour for a different highlight, it's equals 2 or equals 3. If I had 2 different colours associated with equals 1, Encore would only choose one of those to display. So if you had a yellow and a blue highlight and they're on similar layers in other buttons called equals 1, it would only display one of them. But for the moment we do that, and it's important to understand as well that you can't use pictures either and gradients. If you use pictures or gradients, it will make them solid images. So you can only have solid colours. You can have shapes. You could use the text itself again as a highlight. You could have, you know, for alien, you could have an alien egg next to it, but just the outline of the alien egg. Or you can have opacity as well, so we can change the opacity here. So I'm going to bring the opacity down, and I'm actually going to drag this layer by left clicking, dragging it underneath the play symbol, but making sure it's still indented so it's associated with the play folder. And now that is my button there. Okay, now I'm going to create some other buttons. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to have play, so that's play movie obviously. To easily copy this now, you can click the folder, left click and drag it down to the new layer and let go, and it creates a copy of that folder that I can just drag down and have down here. And I'm going to call this extras, and I'm just going to select my highlight, press Ctrl T to free transform it and drag it out. And I'm going to duplicate again, drag this down, and I'm going to have gallery. We're not actually going to go to all of these buttons and do the same again, Ctrl T, but I just want them there so we can see them functioning. It's kind of important to understand as well that Encore is quite a glitchy program. I learnt on Encore CS3, and it took me ages to learn because I realised that actually the version I had some error with it. CS4 has certain errors with buttons, and CS5 certainly does as well. CS6 is quite a stable version, so CS6 is really good. CS5 that we're working in sometimes gets confused if buttons are a little bit too close to each other, so it's a good idea to have your buttons spaced out enough. And when I say it gets confused with the buttons, I mean generally it gets confused if they're close together and you're using what we're going to do, which is a video background as well. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to save this. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and I've got a folder I'm going to save it into called Encore Motion Menus. And what I'm going to do is I've got my assets there already. I'm going to go Folder, and I'm going to call this Menus. Inside here, I'm just going to save this as PSD and call it Main Menu, and save. So now we're going to jump into Encore. So if you want to start up your Encore for the second session.